Very happy to be speaking with Robert Glazer today. Robert is an amazing entrepreneur that grew a company from 7 to 170 employees in a decade. And more interestingly, he did it with starting from working remotely from day one. And was also being recognized by Glazer as one of the top CEO, which tells a lot. I like his point he's making about the four different part of your life, to look at the spiritual one, the intellectual one, physical one, and the emotional one, and he'll get in more details with that. And I'm sure that you will have tools to apply for yourself after listening to Robert. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meetings podcast. I'm Eric Rosenberg, and today I am absolutely delighted to be speaking with Robert Glazer. Bob is an amazing entrepreneur, an amazing individual, as you're going to discover during this interview. But he started the company, Acceleration Partner, that went from 7 at the beginning to 170 employees in 1 decade in 8 different countries. But most impressive for me, because obviously that is very impressive, but even more impressive are those two things. First, he's been named in the top 2 CEOs by Glazer, and you don't cheat with that, and that's very real. And the second thing is he started this company remotely, so they've been remote since day one, which obviously today in 2020 is something very interesting. So, Bob, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Eric, thanks for having me, and I wish you set a lower bar. It always makes it easier for me. So.
Well, I'm just trying to take some of the element of your bio. I haven't mentioned yet your newsletter that is going out every Friday, is now reaching out hundreds of thousands of people. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, especially at the end, and your new book, which is being launched today. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey? Because I think that anybody who's a business owner, especially in our meetings and event industry today, would be inspired by your story.
Why don't I go back to sort of first grade through 7th grade, which was a litany of not impressive report cards that said, I've read them all off in some of my presentations, and mostly, Bobby at the time, but Bobby seems really smart, but he doesn't really apply himself. He doesn't seem focused. He seems creative. He seems to want to do the things that he wants to do and not the other things. I think the most used word was capable, has the ability, really, really good stuff. And I think what I came to understand, and I think this is true for people who've turned out to be kind of entrepreneurial in life, is that, that part of your life rewards conformity, and people who are creative and don't want to conform, like, struggle in that. So I really underachieved for a long time, and then found my way into business and marketing, and really realized that I loved to learn. I was just really bored at what I had been learning, and I can't actually learn stuff that I'm not interested in. I'm just not good at faking it. I'm not good at getting an A when I have no interest in it, which it's funny, is a skill that's rewarded very early on, but not anything you would want anyone to do often as an adult. So I got interested in fast growing businesses, entrepreneurship, started really focusing myself on marketing and high growth businesses. I actually was very entrepreneurial, but very risk averse. I had very strong opinions, but I wasn't willing to sort of put my money where my mouth is. And I think once I finally broke that cycle and flipped, and my last job before I started Acceleration Partners, before I started Acceleration Partners, I was talking to a friend who had offered me to move to California, work for this high growth company. He said, "You're pretty close to being unemployable. If you don't take this job, I'm not sure that you'll have a job again." And he ended up being right. And, once I flipped that and started saying, I am much more comfortable betting on myself and my ideas, and leaned into that, then, things really started accelerating for me. But I am a very late bloomer. Like you would not, if you went back before 20, you would not find any child prodigy, most likely to succeed. Like you would not find anything like that.
And still, Now you're all over the
And
place.
look,
Yeah,
that's all part of the story. And I do think it's too bad these days that too many parents are trying to strip any of the pain and the learning. And I really had to learn at what didn't work and what I wasn't good at and what I didn't like to do. And like lean into that nonconformity. I would say the stuff that makes me somewhat successful today is all the stuff I've been told earlier on, you need to fix that or change that. Really, I just needed to change how it was being applied.
Very interesting. But at what time do you say, you know what, now I'm starting my own company and I don't need to work for others and I'm going to do it?
So now it was about 14 years ago that I started I left my last job and I started two companies, and I really realized that it was more exciting to me to be responsible for myself. I had liked high growth companies and I came at it from a few areas. First was consulting, then incubator venture side. Then I went and worked in one of those companies, not as the founder, and felt kind of marginalized, helping to grow that company, not as part of the founding team. So part of the goal with AP was, I love these companies. I want to work with them, but I don't want to be in the company. So I always thought that I would join one of the companies that we worked with because I'd be sort of enamored with this high growth company and be like, this is the one. What I realized was I liked working with those businesses, but almost like a venture firm, I liked the diversity. I liked our own business and growing that with a great culture and in a very different way. So I never actually felt tempted. That whole world, of high growth, we hear about constantly the winners. Like we hear about the guy that made the NBA. We just don't hear about the ones who, their whole plan A was to make the NBA and they didn't. So I've always liked our approach on it.
It's awesome. Now, if you can just a little bit explain what your two companies are doing. Accelerated Partners and Brand Cycle.
Yeah, so Acceleration Partners represents brands in the performance and partner affiliate marketing industry. We help companies build affiliate programs, which are programs where they partner with people almost like digital business development. And instead of paying for a click or paying for a impression, they agree on an outcome that they're willing to pay for. And then the partner can promote all they want. And when the brand gets the sale or gets the lead, it pays as a percentage of that. So it's a fast growing industry. As we were building that business, we noticed opportunity to represent the partners, but it was complicated to do it because we were representing the brands. So we spun off another firm called Brand Cycle. I actually fully believe, I think if you have an idea within a business, and we saw this too, that's a new idea, everyone will glom to it if it has the upside, but without the risk. And I remember reading an article years ago from Cisco about how many companies they had acquired of ex-employees, and they were, someone saying, well, that's terrible. They had all these people and they let them go and then they bought their company. And they said, look, none of these companies would have made it if those people had their day job and they were doing it. We had to see who wanted to quit their day job, who wanted to go build this, make it successful, and then, buy it back. So we realized that as the idea was gaining traction, and we spun it out, and we had someone who wanted to go run it, and it was a different leadership team, and it was a different equation. It was more upside and less kind of a safe and secure job. So it's a separate company. It's been growing a lot as there's more demand in the industry and people representing the other side. But we're kind of on two sides, right? We're kind of like movie theaters looking for actors, and I would say Brand Cycle represents the actors and finds the movies that are a good fit for them. So they work with, there's some overlap, but they work with hundreds of brands that we don't have as clients.
Got it. And so you say you started 14 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Now, 14 years ago, that's 2006.
6 or 7.
2006, 7. Yeah. What make you go immediately remote at that moment?
Necessity. So the affiliate industry was really fractured. We were trying to be a high-end firm, and we needed people with experience. And the talent was just super fractured across the U.S. So when we wanted to find people, they might have been. We couldn't make them. We had to buy them, and they were kind of all over the place. So we did it sort of with the intention that eventually we would pick where we wanted to be. Our ops team was kind of in Boston, but as the tools got better and we liked the flexibility and in a services business, client services lends itself pretty well to remote because, right, you're dealing with clients all day. It's not as much, and in teams, it's not as much total collaboration across the team internally on a day-to-day basis. And we just decided we liked it. And at some point it went from something that we hid or something that we did by necessity to sort of saying, hey, can this be our strategy? And look, for a while, this was not something. Even last year, we had a client that struggled with it, and you'd almost, because we're working with pretty blue chip brands, and you didn't want them to think everyone was working at their kitchen table, even though we have a very professional way of working from home. But it's amazing how this flips. Like, I've given 20 presentations in the last 4 months on how to build a virtual team and culture. Suddenly, what we do is all in, and we're not hiding it anymore.
That's phenomenal. Now, I remember meeting you first at EO Nerve that you were organizing in Boston.
Seems like 20 years ago, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Right?
I think it was 16, right? Yeah.
What a year the last month has been.
Yeah, I know. Pre-COVID anything pre-COVID is, years ago. Yeah.
It's another life. And then a few years after, I heard you speaking at MMT. And you gave that presentation about the structure you were having with different hubs. So you're working remotely, but you still have those hubs. Can you just maybe elaborate a little bit on that? Because especially today, I think that will give a lot of ideas for a lot of people.
It's funny. I'm glad you asked that, because I talk about it. I think it gets lost in when we won Forbes Best 25 Small Businesses in the U.S., the article said something about being a great place to work, but they don't have a place to work. It was pretty funny. And we happened upon this. So a couple things. We wanted to build a certain type of culture. And part of our culture is connecting with the team and having this annual event. As we got bigger and we tried to have the event where everyone comes together, like 50 people in 50 places was a logistical nightmare. We needed to interview people. And we were like, look, there's some real limitations to like how you would move people around. And we said, well, what if, and also it's actually, we weren't looking for work from home people. We were looking for people who oftentimes this was their first experience working from home. And recruiting really operates around cities. Like, you list a job in a city, you don't list it everywhere in the world, or it's like very expensive because it could be $100 per geography.
Right.
So we said, look, what if there's a hybrid approach here? What if we pick a few cities that have the demographics we want? We say you have to be within an hour of it. That way we can build up a team in that city. They can get together. We can fly in and meet with them. They don't have to work together every day, but they can interview. And then when we do our big event, we'll do it at one of these hubs. And then we'll already have 20 or 30 people there. So we set our goal to have 80% of people in the hub city in a couple of years, and we sort of hit it. And I think this hub strategy has actually been why we've been able to have the type of culture that we built where you can have, look, you're not always getting together with everyone, but that ability to get together from a proximity standpoint. Twice a year, our leadership team flies to the hubs, like in all 1 week, and we sit down and we've touched the whole company. And that's just something that you can't do hiring people anywhere. Also, practically, if you ever tried this, hiring people in 50 states, it's a bleep ton of paperwork. And I mean, it's really administrative nightmare. So we really try to keep to those regions where we have a focus. When you have one person in one state, the paperwork can make it completely not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not to mention your tax return.
Yeah, I had some feedback on that and experience with that. Yes, absolutely. No, and I think that's phenomenal, especially in those world today. Personally, having been before ticketing now and with meetings and events and helping business owners in the meetings and event industry, there's nothing that replaces face-to-face. And I think that your model is actually the hybrid model that is the model of the future, where you have people working remotely, but you also have touch point on face-to-face and people coming together, especially for the culture of the company.
And it's interesting that you said that. I think right. That's our version of hybrid. They're fundamentally remote, so they're all in the same systems, but they have the ability to get together and come together and do an event. The types of hybrid that people are talking about doing, everyone keeps saying is kind of going to be the worst of both worlds, where you try to have the in offices or the out of offices. What makes it work for us is that everyone is on the same system. And so I think just like hybrid school, I think some of these hybrid experiments are actually not going to produce great results. People would be better off being almost more in person with some flexibility for remote, or more remote with some flexibility for in person. But I'm not sure that hybrid will get a lot of people where they want to go, because you have all the office burden, and then you need you can't just go remote. I think what a lot of companies there are certain system tools, things that cost money, this event. So if you have to pay for all of it, it's not going to be super cost effective. People always say, you must have saved a ton of money on office space. And I said, no, our AP Summit event is extraordinarily expensive. It costs what all offices would cost us for a year to get everyone together for those 5 days and to really set the cultural foundation for the whole year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very, very interesting. And I think that people listening today, it's a good food for thought for what they're building. And to your point, I mean, you've developed not only amazing companies and had amazing growth, but more importantly and impressive to me is how you've been recognized by your own employees on Glassdoor. And that's something you can lie about. And I think it's culture, and culture make all the difference. So I know you started this newsletter. Maybe can you share the story on how you start the newsletter, and then we can dig a little bit about your previous book, Elevate.
Sort of by an accident. I had been to a leadership program that really focused on morning routine and sort of taking some quiet and reading and writing something positive in the morning, kind of before starting your day. Some of the stuff they shared with us was a little too rainbow and unicorn for me. So I had some stories and some quotes and stuff I like. So I decided one Friday, I'd just start writing a note to my team. And I think it was called Friday Inspiration, the first one. And it was pretty short. And I sent them for weeks. I liked doing it. I didn't think anyone was reading it. I thought they weren't paying attention. And then slowly I started to hear back from people saying, oh, I really liked this. Or more interestingly, like I shared this with my husband, he shared it with his company, or I sent this to my wife. And it was clear it was going outside the company. And I shared with a few other CEOs at an EO event that I was doing this best practice. And they said, oh, well, send it to us. And one said, oh, this is great. And he started his own, another EO member, and he's been doing it for years. And the other three, said, this is great. We'll just send this to our company. So I decided to run an experiment when people were asking to be added. And I had I set up a newsletter system. It still looked like a basic email. I threw a couple hundred friends, families, business leaders on I knew. And I expected all these like, what the hell is this? Take me off responses, but they didn't come. I got more feedback. They shared it. Someone coming out of that EO Nerve event wrote an article that this is the only newsletter I ever read in ink. And I got 2,000 people signed up that week. Boom. And it just sort of took off from there. And I kind of pinch myself on a Friday, like tomorrow morning when I get up and I'll see these pin dots, all over the world where people reading it in all kinds of interesting places.
It's fabulous. And today is what? How many 100,000 of people are reading it?
It's about 200,000 that read it across the emails and companies and on the LinkedIn platform where I have a newsletter series as well.
That's phenomenal and very inspiring. And your book, Elevate, it's actually, I read it, loved it. And I think that it's not only for business people, it's not only for adults, and I think it's for any human being.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just love it, and would like to dig a little bit into that, so that the first part is say how to grow. You're looking at those 4 levels in with the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and spiritual. How the book is even structured, and if you can just give us a little hint for each of them, and
Sure.
Also when you get to spiritual. It's not necessarily what people...
Yeah, I know. I always have a disclaimer because I struggle with the word too. So I think they go in order. It's spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. Spiritual is really like your core values, core purpose, what you want most. I went through a million names, and that was the one that kept coming up because I think it is really about who you are. It's not religious in any context.
That's my point. A lot of people, when you say spiritual, they thinking are... Buddhist or religion or whatever it is. And
so my definition of spiritual in that context, right, is do you know what your core values are? Do you know what you want most? And then from there, intellectual is how you sort of learn, plan, execute with discipline, have accountability. So you do all of those things. You're better at those when you understand what you want, right? And then that's where your physical capacity comes in, which is, your sort of mental and physical health and the machinery of taking care of your machinery, sort of as you go through this. And then emotional capacity is the one outside of you. So it's how are your relationships and how do you relate to things that you don't control or that happen in the outside world? Mm-hmm. I love the analogy. If it was a race car, right? Spiritual would be designing the race car. Physical would be intellectual would be building the race car. Physical would be like practicing it on the test run. But emotional would be like, how does this car do when you put it out in traffic with other drivers, right? It might freeze up and you might crash, or you might actually do better because you're really good at navigating all the other nuances. So when I talk about the types of things that, I see people and think of these four as like a ball. And I think sometimes it's more helpful to understand which one may be a little underinflated and making your ball wobble, because if they're all growing together and it's rolling, you have a lot of momentum. But spiritual for most people is, can you tell me what your core values are? Because if you can and you can articulate them, your decision-making and everything you do will be 10 times better. Mm-hmm. Intellectual, a common thing for a lot of people at first is improving their morning routine, like the Friday, like getting up, starting the day on offense, maybe writing in a journal, changing their habit in the morning to sort of change all of their habits. There's a ton of stuff that goes in intellectual, but that's a very common first step one. Physical, I always like to say an easy sort of trick is to just pay the entry fee for some event that gives you a future date and an accomplishment that you need to work for. Oftentimes it's the training, right? If you've never run before, then you got to train for a 5K, then suddenly you're going to be running it's much better investment than a gym. Like that accountability for that date in the future will force you to do what needs to be done for that date. And we all feel better when we're, physically like I don't like running, but running is really good for me. I feel the physical effects on my body. So I put on a podcast and I run and I try to distract myself while I'm running to, get the impact on my body. Mm-hmm. And then emotional, I think one of the things that is really easy to do is to identify the people in your life that are energy vampires. These are people you feel worse around when you spend time, and find ways to spend less time with those people. And I say this in the book, and I think this was one of the biggest tricks I learned from a mentor or tips. You don't have to have breakup with these things, whether they're family or otherwise. You just have to apply less energy to these relationships that are exhausting you. You don't have to say like, I'm breaking up with you. You just kind of need to reapply from, if I'm having, going with someone every week to do something and it's not good, like flip it to every 2 weeks, and just reapply that time to some of those relationships where, it could be like you or I, where we only talk a couple of times a year, but it's always good, right? It's always uplifting. And those are better. At least for me, but I'm glad to hear from you as well. Both reciprocally. Yeah. Some of the best relationships I have are not the people I talk to the most, right? You go to somewhere like an MMT and it's just, you feel like you're in your environment with your people and everyone lifts you up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one other point in your book that I like very much is you're talking about the values, but also how to align with it. And I think that a lot of the stress and a lot of frustration that people can experience is when they have to do things or they have to work in an environment that is not aligned with their own values.
Yeah, and they don't know that unless they can articulate that, right? So I think that's, if you can nail that, you make such better choices. And I'm actually about to release a course on discovering your core values, because it's the number one thing that I get asked from Elevate. We built a system we've used for a bunch of our leaders for a year, and they understand that thing about themselves, and then they understand suddenly why they're struggling with this person on their team, or why they're struggling with a friend, or because they're just sort of universal truths. You also, when you get down to your goals, you make sure that you set long-term goals that fulfill your values, right? Yeah. So otherwise you're making money and you bought that house, and all that, it doesn't matter. Like I always say that I talk about the difference between success and achievement. And I think success sometimes is this external perception of doing well. Mm-hmm. And achievement is you accomplishing what's most important to you and you set out to do. So some people might think that, like, let's say I was a successful surgeon, and I was, crushing it and had a nice car. People are like, he is so successful. But what if I just like yearned from the bottom of my heart to be like writing books in a cabin in Montana, and I would be happier, right? Then I actually haven't achieved what's important to me. I've followed someone else's or society's playbook of success, which looks great to them, but it doesn't feel good to me. So I always say when you're setting long-term goals, you should say, why do I want that house? Like if I want that house because it's a gathering point for my family for future generations, and that's then A, am I being honest with myself about that? And B, if I alienate my entire family in the search of getting that house and I get divorced and my kids don't speak with me, then I'm probably not going to accomplish that goal.
Absolutely. And you made me think that, and I actually shared that in, I have a Facebook group, The Business of Meetings, for people in the industry. And I just shared recently an exercise that I did with my EO forum in February, which is the 10 years vision.
Yeah.
And what is important for you. And that has not only helped me going through the months, the recent months with the pandemic, but most importantly, really focusing my mind of what's important, the time I want to spend with whom and why. And that leads me to another question that is so important. And I love the fact that you use the word integration instead of balance when we're talking about work-life balance.
Yeah.
People
I don't believe in work-life balance.
I agree. I totally agree. But can you elaborate?
Like right now, if I was having this discussion with you and sort of having my lunch and juggling my toddler on my lap, like that would be like balance. But no one wants that, right? They want like the time with you here, the quiet lunch that I'm eating, the time with my baby, quietly, and they want a schedule that lets them integrate. I think that if you are in search of this perfect balance all the time, you will be very disappointed. I think balance comes more in the aggregate in the form of days, weeks, or months where you say, I'm doing all of these things that are important to me and I'm able to integrate my life, to make them all work. I think that even I heard Randy Zuckerberg, Mark's sister, speak, who's, infinite resources. And I think she had 5 things every day. It was like, eat well, exercise, and she said, I can only do 3 every day. Yeah. The other 2, like, and this is someone who has all the resources in the world saying, I can pick 3 and I have to be fine that the other ones won't happen. And so, right, her balance comes probably over a multi-week view. It's not even on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a great point you're making. And now I remember what you were saying. And it's true. If you want to be fully committed and present in the moment, there's so much things you can do in a limited time in a day.
I mean, we've had these very honest discussions with employees that are going through things personally. We've had a lot whose parents were sick and needed different approaches, and say, look, don't get stuck half in and half out, right? When you're here, we want you to be here and be excited to be here. And we don't want people dancing around you. And when you're there, you don't want to have to worry about work. So, I remember one person's mom was going through a long terminal process and she wanted to be with her on Thursdays and Fridays on those days every week. And, she wanted to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and be engaged and wanted that distraction. Someone else had a much more finite period and wanted to just needed to go away for 3 weeks and spend that time with their family. And so in either case, we're totally supportive, but again, we understand there won't be balance. So it's like, where do you feel like you can, really be 100% in both places?
Very interesting. And leading to that, what you're saying is that try to know all the people you're working with and what's important for them. How do you inspire people? And especially, how do you inspire people when all of us now are working remotely and that you make sure that everybody's aligned in the culture of the company and that their own personal values fit into the company culture, that they're happy to be there. How do you inspire people and the ripple effect? How do you also then inspire people that you might even not be that in direct contact with?
I'll tell you, it's pretty low bar these days, given that most of us are so busy trying to, torment others and tell them they're wrong. And it's actually probably I
have no clue what you're talking about.
Probably the easiest time ever to inspire people by just not scaring them or telling them that they're wrong. But it's interesting. I've been sending out the Friday forwards for years. I get 50, 100 different replies each week. It gives me a good measuring stick of where people are. And some of the deepest ones I've gotten from people I don't even know were when this started, and it just shows to me that even in a virtual world, you can connect with people, you can uplift them, you can reach out. And
are you answering all those emails personally?
I answer a large majority of them.
Wow.
I try, if someone writes me something meaningful, I try to reply to it, even if they disagree. If they write something sort of crazy and hateful, whatever, I just don't. I tend to not engage with that stuff.
Good for you.
I've learned the writer in me, or the argument wants to be like, I'm going to make this irrational person rational. That's never worked once.
You know what? Just if I can interrupt you on that, since I started the podcast and the Facebook group, I have one person that reached out to me, and I mean, I have more than one person reach out to me, but I have one negative person that reached out to me that really, don't you realize that we are all losing our job in our industry? There's no events. And I replied to him, which I probably won't do in the future, but I said, trust me, I've been in this industry for over 20 years. Yeah. I have friends that are being followed and losing their job. That's my way of trying to help people, is to share the knowledge. It's to connect the people that I know that they have knowledge that can share, and basically give hope and give the opportunity to learn new skills right now. Yeah. And then I thought, but why am I answering him? Why is he taking the time to write this almost hateful thing? And you're right. You should not waste time with
Sometimes people want to be heard. I had a couple of people who wrote very ones next week, and I wrote a reply, and then it just was like a different person coming back. But I think there's people who are just looking for a fight, or they got to be the victim, and particularly on LinkedIn or social media, it's just not worth engaging. It's not.
No, absolutely not. So today you're launching the new book.
Yeah.
Perfect timing for the podcast.
It's the Friday prequel. It's the prequel. Yeah.
It's a prequel. Okay. Yeah. Can you tell us about how it come about, what we can be reading, and how we can buy the book?
Yeah. So I think it's a good lesson in sort of timing. And so I actually originally wrote this book called Friday Forward, and I had all these people reading Friday Forward, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a lot less subscribers at the time. And I said, a lot of the early stories people hadn't read. And so I wrote a sort of compilation. I shopped it to agents, and they all said, yeah, no one buys compilations. And one of them said, I love this writing, but no one buys compilations. But what's the story behind this? So actually Elevate came out of that, of saying, what is it about I've been doing in my life, that we've been doing with our company, that these messages sort of have connected with people that I don't know. And it sort of illuminated the whole capacity building thing for me, and the framework of capacity building. But then 2 years later, talking to my publisher and saying, I kind of did this, and it just seemed like actually then the time was right. So Friday Forward, now there's 5 years of these stories. Most of the people have joined in the last couple of years. They haven't seen them. What it does is it takes the 52, got to get the math on this right. So what is it? It's 52 divided by 4. I should know this at this point.
13.
What? 13. Yeah. So it's the weeks of the year. So it takes the 13 sort of, I say best, the ones that had the most kind of response or interactivity, I think resonated.
Engagement there.
Engagement from each of those capacities. So it goes in that order. But so if Elevate is the sort of theory, like if you said, look, I buy this, I want to prove my capacity. These are like the actual stories of people in each of these areas doing, important things with these. So it was just the time was right. My platform was bigger. We had the idea to connect the two so that they could go together. So it just, the time for that book wasn't right a couple of years ago, and hopefully it's right for it now.
And where can we buy it?
So you can buy it pretty much anywhere books are sold. Amazon, if you're global, Book Depository does free shipping anywhere in the world. And it's you can go to robertglazer.com and you'll see all the books listed there.
Awesome. Phenomenal. And my last question, Bob, and we both know that it's coming from Jason, that I love this question. If we are about to meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne, what will we be celebrating?
I was celebrating a full night's sleep. COVID vaccine, maybe.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to be celebrating that Friday Forward, was a New York Times bestseller, that it sold hundreds of thousands of copies, because I believe that would mean that in all of this mess, that a platform of positivity, was out there spreading. And I think the more people that read these stories, they're not my stories, they're stories that I've sort of curated and brought to life, and want to improve themselves and want to help others improve. That would just be a real anecdote to where we are today.
And being a reader of the Friday Forward, being a reader of Elevate, which, by the way, made the Wall Street Journal best list in 2019, and also the USA Today. And apparently Friday Forward will make the New York Times bestseller list. That's the best I wish you.
It is a BHAG, and I need everyone to buy it. I'm gonna use my guilt on a lot of people. They've read a lot of Friday Forwards, and so I'm gonna lean on them. If you've gotten some value out of this, it's time to pay up a little bit.
That's like Gary Vee when he's selling his wine. If you get any value for it, right. Yeah. But reading your Friday Forward, I have no doubt that that's going to be a very interesting book. I'm going to buy it as soon as we finish this conversation. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it is on, I did do audiobook this time. It was one of the biggest feedbacks last time. So the audiobook will be ready at launch. And I actually just did the audiobook for Elevate yesterday. So that'll come out in October.
Fabulous. Bob, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully face-to-face, and to keep on reading everything you're writing every Friday.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate all your support.
Thank you. Fascinating and inspiring discussion with Bob Glazer today. And also congrats to him on launching his book, Friday Forward. I can't wait to read it. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can go to www.evenbusinessformula.com/group to join us in the Business of Meetings private Facebook group, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you.